The Lord rebukes the hardness of heart of the disciples. First, Mary Magdalene came with the message given by the angel in the tomb, but they did not believe. Then the Emmaus disciples, Easter Monday, tell their message. Quote, "But they did not believe them either." End quote. So the Lord himself had to come. One sees well how God writes straight on crooked lines. The first high priests of the Catholic Church had to look back bashfully on their own difficulties of faith at the beginning. This is exactly where the Lord hooks in and gives them the Great Commission for the whole world. The expression of faith that was still so lacking in the apostles is baptism. This faith, the acceptance or rejection of which decides a person's eternal destiny, will be confirmed by appropriate signs. However, these signs will be granted only to those apostles or disciples who have accepted the faith. This does not mean people for whom faith is something quite nice to live with, and anyway, the alternatives are not so nice and so on. No! To the people who, like the apostles, have fought their way through all the doubts of faith imposed by hard-heartedness or the devil, they will have the power to work miracles. Here we must put a parenthesis. Mark the Evangelist writes in the spirit of a love unknown to most of us, which must have been felt by those who rallied around the Son of God for 7 years, apart from Judas. In the people concerned then, love and hope can be presupposed. Their problem is faith. In the newer times of the Church, faith is now and then a problem. Jansenists, Pietists, Rationalists, Modernists, Neo-Modernists, they are a minority in the large number of Catholics. But love, that is missing in the Church from head to foot. How could Pius X be canonized after 40 years? What did he do? As Pope, he threw away the 1,500-year-old breviary, worked his way into the Missal to the limit of what is allowed. On the other hand, he had the modernists supervised by a newly founded secret service, thus an average pontificate. What was the great thing about him? He didn't scourge himself, he didn't make nights of atonement, he didn't make pilgrimages, he didn't make rosary crusades, he didn't make prayer marathons, he didn't make 3-hour sermons, he didn't do fasting regimens of a Spanish model, he got fatter and fatter. What was it? As chaplain, parish priest, canon, regent, bishop, patriarch, pope, rung after rung on the ladder of responsibility, he never did anything but his duty. Surely then one would have to canonize the faithful officials as well. The difference was the extent of Giuseppe Sarto's love. He not only did his duty, he tore himself apart with love for his own. He was granted the grace to work some of the miracles announced in this gospel during his lifetime. As a priest, he imitated the multiplication of bread in his granary. As a pope, he healed those born blind. This love was still, in those days of the apostles, almost a prerequisite. Let us now look at the announcement of the miracles. Not necessarily their designation is to be taken. After all, Christ may also speak in parables as the risen one, although noticeably shorter. The quote-unquote speaking in new tongues existed and will exist, but the real meaning of the expression is the convincing way of speaking. Every person has his own language, idioms, words, memories, ideas, which are peculiar to him as an individual. After all, one must not forget in a time when fashion dictates clothing, not only against all sense of shame, but also against all sense of reason. So much so that today, even in rain, hail, and 2 degrees plus, one can see women without hats. The man, however, who is controlled by his soul and not by television, is all the more different from others as his soul is in control. A conformist saint? Insanity. A conformist individual? Insanity. Now the art of the apostle, from Paul to Lefebvre, is to convince this individual, not a crowd of idiots. He must be a Roman to the Romans, a Greek to the Greeks. That was Pius X. Alin, that managed Lefebvre in Africa. This is the real meaning of quote-unquote speaking in tongues, not the nonsense dreamed up by the demonized charismatics. The quote-unquote picking up of snakes and drinking the quote-unquote poison is to be understood similarly. Don't they talk about touching a hot potato today? Oh pity, how many priests would like to avoid exactly that? They turn on their monotonously purring sermon voice and la-da 20 minutes about the Blessed Mother, who would have fallen asleep here on earth because of the blah blah blah. Confronted with a controversial issue, they cowardly take refuge in a non-existent majority that does not find such a thing appropriate. They may get their sheep, but they have no increase. Worse, they rebuke the doubter, exhorting him not to brood, but to believe. The main thing is that he donates. These are the kind of priests who you could replace with a tape recorder in the pulpit, and no one would notice the difference. The real apostle touches the hot iron, he lifts the snake. The martyrs did it, and Pius X with the modernists. Archbishop Lefebvre took up his fight in retirement. Similarly with drinking poison. He who has the faith and the love cannot be dissuaded by any heresy. One may be confused at times, but does not lose it because of one of God's most precious gifts, namely, the sensus catholicus, that sense in which one's naturally given common sense tells one, stop, that's not Catholic. The basic condition for this state, however, is the most complete openness to truth. He who reads off his truths in some, usually dull tables, or, God beware, in his egoism, does not have this sense. Chesterton already said that humility consists in reducing oneself to a point. The mathematics book says that this is a thing without extension. When you get to that point, a blade of grass seems just as amazing in creation as a Sequoia gigantea. Only the insatiable striving for the perfect truth gives one the possibility to overcome the poison of heresy. One must love the truth more than oneself, and when the brain hurts. For Christ did not say, I give you the truth, but I am the truth. Today we also want to remember the holy martyr, Pope St. Urbanus I, the patron saint of wine growers. We need his protection in a special way. He is the patron of the second matter of the Holy Mass, so he is one of the pillars of the celebration of the Mass. During the unfortunate, purely Protestant prohibition in the USA, 1919 to 1933, wine growers were at least still allowed to produce wine for Mass and for personal use. But the next time? The risk of losing wine is small, But is that true for all countries? Saint Urbanus here is also symbolic of the Mass as such. Let's pray right now that a criminal EU does not put them under the heading of sex.